y'all. Hey, and welcome to the Nurse Boss Shift. It's your girl, Dr. Kiiyonna Jones.
Still P, the beauty NP.
And today we are coming to you this is kind of going to be a conversation about something that many of you may have already heard about, but we felt compelled to actually have the conversation from our perspective of what happened with Tristin Kate Smith. And for some of you who may or may not know, she was the young 28-year-old nurse who committed suicide, and she left a letter. And so today we're going to dive into just what the letter was about, and from our own perspectives, what we feel and believe really is saying about the healthcare system that we all exist in. So stay tuned and let's dive into this somber, emotional, but potentially opportunity for change in our healthcare system that we're going to talk about today. So, Chris, when did you first hear about the situation with Tristin?
Yeah, so a couple of weeks ago, I saw it floating around on internet, of course, social media, and I read it, and I was just so saddened and hurt from her. And then just like reading the comments, other people were saying, different things, just like, why would she let it get that bad and such? You never know anyone's personal experience. But I read the letter and I just felt so heartbroken for her because I know we have felt and all feel that way about the healthcare system, about work, about being a nurse that she felt.
Yeah.
So I saw it on social media initially.
Yeah. And I saw that too. Like it was not just on platforms that were nursing platforms. It was like on major blog sites that were very general, had a large, broad, general audience. And of course, when you get to those, it's like, that's where the people are commenting and saying like, why didn't you just leave? It's not that serious. And I think the way she positioned it, like it says it's a letter to her abuser.
Right.
And anyone, if you've never been in an abusive relationship or a toxic relationship, you will never be able to relate to why a man or a woman stays under those circumstances, right? And so I feel like it's very much so the same for people who are like, well, I would have left. It's not that serious. It's like, you don't know what you would have done because you haven't been in that situation. And we know that, as with any abuser, as she coined it, it's not just a matter of leaving. They have a hold on a lot more than just you physically. Mm-hmm. What I found the most, probably that really bothered me the most, was like her family. Like I was reading about her dad, and he was just talking about how she always wanted to be a nurse. And like, imagine having this, your goal in life is to serve and to help others who are in need, and that's all you want to do. And then you get to that point, and all of a sudden, it is nothing like you thought it was. Especially that's not glorified. It's not glorified. It is glorified, but it's not the experience you have when you are in that position. And so she didn't have anything else that she wanted to do. She arrived at the destination, and only to find out that it was fake. It wasn't real for what she had thought it was going to be. So then how do you just, this is not it, and just leave if you have such a connection on such a deeper level for the role, right? And I felt like that is why people would not understand, especially if they're not in healthcare. Now, there are people, I was reading some of the blogs that even nurses were saying like, no, I'd leave and this and that. But you don't know the love that she had for nursing and what she wanted to do with that. And I think none of us are in a position where, we could speak for where she was mentally at that point.
Right. Yeah. And I also feel like a lot of us get duped to this. We go into nursing thinking that it's going to be one thing, and then it turns out to be a whole different thing. And also I have to remind myself, not just with, this but other times I would tell, nurses, if you're not happy, then just leave. But I have to also remember too, everyone's not in a huge city like we are, with multiple different hospitals that you can just go to. Some people are in small towns, and that's literally all they have. If you're in a come from a small town and you're a nurse, there's 1 or 2 hospitals, you will end up feeling stuck. So yeah, and I was reading that too about her family just saying that she always wanted to be a nurse, and it's just really heartbreaking when you know, a lot of people dream of being nurses from when they're younger and just helping people. And like you said, the glorification of nursing, of how it should be or how it used to be, or how people are trying to present it. But then when you get into those spaces and you start working, you find out that it's completely different. And I know just from me being an ER nurse, that's a whole different hold that has on you. You know, ER nursing has been, that's what I read about it a lot, is that it's like an abusive relationship. Like you want to leave, but and then you start feeling bad for your patients, and then you start feeling bad for your teammates, and then you feel bad when you're not there taking time to yourself, or you feel bad for leaving. Like you're not a real, what am I going to do? Like I've been in ER and I'm going to go like be a desk nurse. Like to some people, just, you know, they're addicted to that adrenaline of the ER and such. So as much as you're addicted to a relationship, right? So then you have to separate yourself from that. There's a lot of emotions that go into that. And also that, you know, she had wrote this letter a few months prior.
Yeah, it was like 5 months before.
So it's not like, oh, work was horrible and, you know, I just came home and decided to end my life, but it's a buildup. And I see that, you know, largely one of the things in her life that contributed to that was the fact that she was feeling abused at work. And that's just a sad situation where you know, we don't even know what else she may have been dealing with at the time.
And abuse comes in so many forms too. Like that's the thing too.
Yeah. It's not just someone slapping you around. Like it's small, little, you know, like
it's the micro.
You can't have the day off because, you know, we're going to be so behind and the patients are going to suffer and there's going to be long wait times. And
I want to read an excerpt from one from her letter. And she says, this one really hit me. And like, honestly, it was a trigger for me. And it said, I remember the first time I heard about nurses getting hit. I remember that you asked them what they'd done or didn't do to prevent it from happening. Don't protect yourself by fighting back, you said. Just lay with your hands over your head and wait until security comes. You created an environment of fear and blame in a place we already felt unsafe. And that, even when I read it again, because I say that part, but that gives me the chills because I can relate to that. And that not just from being a nurse, from being a woman, this is a female dominated profession. And I really, truly don't think it's coincidental that it is handled, the dynamics of it is the way it is. I don't think it's mutually exclusive to the fact that it's nurses. I think it's because we're nurses and we're predominantly women.
Female. Yeah.
And if you think about in our just world, like the system that we exist in, right? It's always that. And I don't think that's a coincidence or by chance. I think it's because of who we are as females in our, you know, when you look at things from a larger perspective, we're not valued the same. And you hear that in relationships. What could you have done differently? When people experience, unfortunately, trauma related to abuse, but physical abuse, sexual abuse, what could you have done? They always blame the abused. And I'm sorry, but what the letter, and she so eloquently wrote it. And I, as someone who has also been a survivor of abuse, like domestic abuse, she nailed it with it and it's true that it's what could you have done? Now, when you add from my perspective, I also look at it from the lens of a woman, from the lens of a nurse, but also from the lens of a woman of color. And it's the trifecta,
right?
In my opinion, that we are experiencing this on top of the other layers. And so we get that too. And then you add the fact of being a woman of color. And so as I was reading it, it just made me so emotional and it really triggered me because that does happen a lot in the healthcare setting. And when you get those old school nurses who are now in leadership, those are the ones who are in charge. And when they're sitting at that board table, They're advocating for way back when we allowed that to happen. They're not advocating for the new nurses like Tristin, who emotionally don't have the fortitude that we had to have back then, right? Just don't have it. And it's not necessary. I always say like the, millennials and Generation Zs, they're like, listen, I'm not dealing with that. Bye. They're not dealing with it. And so I feel like this kind of shined a bright light on the xenophobia that exists in our profession, the racism that exists, which we've been screaming from the rooftops that exist in our profession. And then also the hierarchical position of nurses when it comes to the value chain in the healthcare setting.
Right. And that's such a good point that you bring up about protection, us being females, because it reminds me of a time I worked in the ER and a patient actually had a gun with them and went in the bathroom and shot themselves. I was on maternity leave, of course. But it was traumatizing to nurses. And then what do? They put a bullet screen shield in the front. That's it. Like, what is that going to help? This person already got back. So it's just like, the nurses who, like you said, who are in those boardrooms are not fighting for the times of now. Like, what is now says that people bring guns everywhere and they're not afraid to shoot. So we need more protection, but it's like, what are you guys sitting there doing when you're in these board meetings? And then being a woman of color, because it's really like, well, what did you do? What did you say? How did you say it? And it's always just a blame on the person being abused, but never a blame on the abuser or the person that is allowing this environment of abuse to happen. Those people are never blamed. It's always like, what did you do? What you could have done better? And that really weighs on you, on your heart, on your soul, especially when you know that you're giving your all. And working with these psych patients, it's much different. I did not feel protected at work. I know they said one nurse was just walking down the hallway and a psych patient just yanked a chunk of her hair out. No changes were made. So it's just so sad that we even have to deal with the mental abuse, but we are also literally dealing with physical abuse at work. And it seems like it goes on everywhere and no one's really doing anything about it. We are left with the remnants of that damage to deal with day in and day out.
And the thing is, the truth of the matter is we're not protected, and you can't tell me there's nothing that can be done. It's just not a priority. It is not a priority. And honestly, I have never felt protected working in a hospital setting. Never. I'm talking about even if it was from violence, even if it was from being thrown racial slurs, I've never felt protected. And that I always used to say, and I see this going around on TikTok where new nurses are like kind of making jokes about, when the patient says, I don't want a Black nurse, and they're like, bye, I got one less patient. But to me, you don't realize the emotional damage that does to you. You can try to make it like, oh, okay, well, fine. I got, one less patient. I don't have to worry because they just give the white nurse or the nurse that they are okay with having as far as their racial background, that they're okay with having. But do you realize the psychological effect compounded? That it affects you. Like, we can make fun of it and we can joke about it, but you're not being protected. You should not have to experience even a patient telling you, oh, or calling you a Black, or telling you because you're Black, they don't want you. That is trauma. And the hospitals and these organizations that are just saying like, oh, okay, well, we'll get you another nurse. And that's it. What about the psychological remnants of that and what it does to that nurse? That is never discussed. And I know this is not about racism in nursing, but that is a part of abuse that we experience. And yes, it is not exclusive to, but it is mostly experienced by nurses of color, of course, but it is still truly a part of our experience, and that is not talked about. That, on top of all of the other things, leads to the trauma. Now, let me tell you something. This is data from the CDC and Prevention and National Violence Data Reporting System. And they did this study that between 2007 to 2018, that nurses were 18% more likely to die from suicide than the general population. Now, that's nurses in general, right? Now, when you extrapolate female nurses, the risk of death by suicide nearly doubled compared to the general population. Doubled. That is so, when I read that, I was like, whoa. Now, we don't have any data from 2020, when the onset of COVID until 2022, but I expect, or I project, that it's going to have risen dramatically because of that trauma. This was already a problem before there was a COVID-19, before there was a pandemic. Go ahead.
A lot of research when I was doing my self-care business on nurses and suicide. And yes, it is double when we compare it to the full population. And there still isn't really many groups who are advocating for this cause. So after they found that doctors had a high suicide rate too, then they said, actually, I think it was UCSD or San Diego State got together and created an organization that helps to prevent suicide among doctors. And then slowly, it has been years since I researched this, but after that, then they started adding to include nurses because they saw that nurses had a high suicide rate as well. But yeah, it's double when you look at female nurses and the rates of suicide. And like you said, this has been before COVID. So now, what are we doing post-COVID? Like, it was a problem before then, and now so many of us suffer, or so many nurses. I can't even say us, because I didn't see as much as a lot of nurses. What I saw was traumatic, but I know that there are still nurses suffering from PTSD. I talked to them at work. And it just seems like that's been kind of swept under the rug. I know they were doing, at our job, and I will say our managers probably went even more above and beyond in the ER at the time for this, but that was just because our managers happened to care. It wasn't anything that was put on by the hospital itself. So it's like, where's the help for those nurses? Because these numbers are going to continue to climb what we're dealing with and post-COVID and beyond.
Yeah, it's true. And I don't know. It's just one of those things where, okay, we always talk about, entrepreneurship and nursing and why nurses should pursue entrepreneurship. But, this is not one of those episodes to say, oh, become an entrepreneur, you don't have to worry about that. This episode is about, it needs to change. Yes. It needs to change. And I think now would be the best time to really get out there and advocate for the change. I mean, we amplify our voices on these social platforms. They hear us. Tristin she wrote that letter 5 months before she committed suicide. Her family found it. It's going all over social. Millions and millions of people are seeing it. And so I know that this could be a pivotal moment for us as healthcare professionals if we use it the right way. And I'm not talking about, and I didn't even really talk about it on my social platforms, because I felt like, I don't like to jump on trends per se when it comes to this type of sensitive topic. I'm not getting on here and giving my 2 cents about the emotional state or anything. I just feel like it's too sensitive to do that on these social platforms. I felt like it was appropriate on our podcast because we do get a lot more intimate in detail, and we're able to talk more about perspectives, and we get able to get deeper. But I feel like this is not an opportunity to grow your following on this.
Yeah.
I think this is an opportunity to evoke change within the healthcare system if we collectively come together and do so.
I was going to say, I was going to ask what are steps that we can take, because a lot of these things do just feel like such huge elephants. And it's like, how can little old me do something? Go stand on the corner and yell to the top of my lungs. What can we do collectively as nurses to bring about change, and why haven't we yet? I guess.
Yeah. Well, it's fear. It's the same way with, we're taking steps. Kaiser just had 75,000 100,000 striking. That was a record. So we see it's on the horizon. Like these are moments, pivotal moments that could really change what our healthcare system looks like for us if we stick together. I don't feel like what happened with Tristin is an isolated incident per se. I feel like it gained a lot of traction because of the timing that it happened. But I believe that this social media space that we're in, we can use it to our good and come together and have these discussions. We can force them and put them in when I say them, I mean the healthcare, the people, the powers that be, the board, the whoever, force them in positions where they have to have conversations with us. Now, as far as they're concerned, they kind of look at us like blue collar workers. So it's just like, you make a lot of money compared to other blue collar workers, but they can't compare us to them because we give, like, you cannot quantify or put a dollar amount on what we give. And I know I'm biased, and I always say that, but like people go to work, blue collar workers don't have to give of anything emotionally and mentally. I think that's the biggest expense that we have in our role as nurses. And I don't care if you're making $100 an hour, $150 an hour, that cannot reimburse you for the emotional transactions that happens with every patient, family members, and the experiences that we have. Nothing can replace that. I don't care how much they're paying you. And so I think us looking at it differently, I despise the fact that, we get looked at as, like we got big money. Then, there goes around all the time, like, you a nurse, you big. Like, no, do you understand? So we have to start changing that narrative and start looking. And I talked about this before on one of the episodes. One of my professors, she says, we're never going to be respected in the PhD program. She's like, we're never going to be respected until we can quantify what we do. We have quantifiable results of our presence, and we have standardization. And we can't have the standardization if some people are accepting crumbs and others are trying to say we deserve more. We have to have a unified approach to this. And it's not a one thing. Like, honestly, Christal, if anyone thinks to themselves, like, I'm just one person, I think they are so far removed from the world that we're in, because we're all interconnected. And if nothing else, social media has shown us that. So I don't care if you have a following of 200 people, you can go on your platform and start talking about the issues that matter the most to you right now.
And you're right, because other people are listening and watching. I think, now I hear a lot more of, so before it was just like, you're a nurse, like, that's so cool, blah, 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 from like patients' families. And then now it's like, you guys work so hard, and, what you guys been through with COVID. So I feel like the public is listening if these healthcare organizations are not. So I think you're right. Like you said, just sharing it at least with whoever is following us, so that they, even if they're just public, not in healthcare, they know, because if we can get everybody to realize the stresses or what we deal with, the trauma and things, then maybe the healthcare systems will start, listening.
Yeah.
Because we have to do it together, because just, trying to do it yourself, there's no way that you can. So we have to collectively come together. And I think it starts with just the immediate people who follow us or that we speak to, really letting them know what we deal with as nurses, and that it's not all pretty. I think, they did all the emotional news reporting, if you will, after COVID, but it's like, okay, what about now? We're 2-3 years out of it. We're still suffering. Who's covering that story? Who's following that? So I think we have to keep the conversation going, such as platforms like this, a podcast, to keep the conversation going, so that people don't think that it's or put a light on the nursing community like we're big money, or that we're just have all this money and we don't suffer from it emotionally, mentally, and physically.
Yeah. And so I feel like that it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take some time. But I think these type of conversations can really be pivotal in determining how long that time is, whether it's like a year versus 20 years, 30 years, like, or even if it happens in our generation. Hey, y'all, are you aimlessly trying to find your tribe? Are you trying to find a group of like-minded healthcare entrepreneurs to connect with because you know you are destined to be doing more? Well, I want to give you the opportunity to do just that. Let me introduce you to the Nurse Boss Mob community. If you're listening to this podcast, I know that you have a desire to have more and be more. And you may be in an environment that just does not allow or foster for growth as an entrepreneur. Well, the Nurse Boss Mob community is designed to help you do just that. It is time to connect to a community, you guys. That is the cheat code. That is the way you can leverage and grow a lot faster from exactly where you are to the next phase that you need to be in. So if this is something that you're interested in, click on the notes below and join the wait list. We only open one time a year. So if it's not open currently, make sure you get on the wait list so you can be the first to get notified. We're opening the doors and allowing those who have an interest in connecting with like-minded individuals November the 10th. This is the only time this year where you will have the opportunity to join the community. So if you're looking to network and connect and grow and leverage the power of collectivism, this is your opportunity. Click the link below. Now to the opposite side of that, and I just being devil's advocate, we know healthcare is a business. That's the system. It really is doing what it's supposed to do. Right. We got to be honest. Right. It's working how it's supposed to work. It's the top industry, the top 3, right? Healthcare, we know that, in the United States. It is a huge, massive machine, and it's really working well. It is. And I don't know, and that part, you know, we have these conversations about like, oh, this CEO made 20 million. And you know my perspective, that CEO has added the value to bring in that 20 million. You are making $75, $60 an hour because you're a repetitive skilled laborer and the CEO is the visionary. And you get paid for your imagination more than you get paid for a skill you learn. Right. That's why I say be an entrepreneur. Because entrepreneur puts you in the visionary position. And when you're a visionary and your ideas come to life, you get paid for that. Right. Yeah. So that's the next part of that. But what I don't agree with is the fact that we have to have so much trauma with it. Now, if you're going to hire us and you're going to pay us $50, $75, $100 an hour, make sure we're safe. Exactly. Make sure our emotional needs are met. Make sure we're okay. I just had a conversation, was it with a client? I just had a conversation with someone. Oh, I know what it was. It was a nurse. It was someone I was having a discovery call with. And she told me that she had recently hurt herself at work. She literally got electrocuted. Her whole right side blown out. She got electrocuted. And you know, you learn about that, right? When you're taking your competencies, right? She got electrocuted. They sent her to workman's comp. You know, workman's comp is their doctors, right? Sent her to workman's comp. They exacerbated her burn even more because they didn't even want to let her leave when she got burned. Wow. They didn't want to let her leave. They were like, just sit here, just this. They tried to make it like it wasn't anything. Long story short, she advocated for herself, ended up leaving. Because, you know, if they tell you, you always are going to feel a level of confliction because it's like, I don't want to abandon my patients. You know, that's the fear. Anyway, she advocated for herself. She ended up leaving. She was off for some days. Then she ended up going to their workman's comp doctor. They did something to her. She said she woke up and had blisters everywhere. So I didn't ask her details of what they had done. Long story short, after she went through that, she was trying to get on permanent disability. They denied her. Now she's off. She's not on permanent disability. She, of course, hired an attorney, but now they're sending her through the ringer. This is what I'm talking about. Like, this is the system that we exist in.
It's horrible. My friend I told you got COVID at work, lost her voice. It's been 2 years in January. She talks like, same thing, workman's comp. They're telling her, we'll give you $100,000, but you can't work here anymore because doctor says she can't work in any job where she uses 10% or more of her voice.
Yeah.
Sent through the ringer, same thing. And it's like,
that is, where's that? Oh my gosh.
It's so sad. Getting your arm electrocuted. And now you're being sent through the ringer like it was your fault.
Yep. And now she's trying to take care of herself.
$200 an hour. We're not like asking for astronomical wages outside of what we should get with the crazy growing economy. But yes, keep us safe. Like, compensate us when we get hurt at your facility for you not keeping us safe. That's the least that you can do. But they won't even do that.
So then on top of not being safe, on top of experiencing racism, and then on top of feeling unprotected, on top, like just physically unprotected, no mental health support at all. Like, this cannot continue.
No.
This is this is like the recipe for other Tristin Smiths of the world. If we don't do something has to change. It has to. It has to. So
I think at this point, what we can do, like you said, is just start with our immediate circles and just highlight these things, continue to talk about it, continue to keep names like Tristin in the forefront so that we never forget these things, so that we can hopefully prevent somebody from doing the same thing in the future. At least be a voice to a nurse where, maybe you're speaking about it and a nurse is feeling some type of way, so she might feel comfortable coming to you because you're voicing this and you might be able to save her from doing something like this.
Right.
I think it's important to speak about it so that we can be help or a safe haven from one of our other nursing brothers or sisters who may be going through this and feel that they have no hope and that nobody's listening.
Yeah. I agree. I know it's going to be a huge fight, but we can't let her life be in vain. And there's many others like her, by the way. There is something called post-pandemic stress disorder that's being studied right now. It's not official DSM for diagnoses yet, but it is in the making, and it is something that is real. And I am really, 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 really wondering like what those numbers for suicide is going to be since the pandemic. And the truth of the matter is, you guys, this is really not a plug for entrepreneurship, but you have to find a way to find your freedom. I don't know. Everyone has what their freedom is going to look like, but this ain't it. Yeah. This is not it. You guys, as always, we appreciate you for tuning in, listening to us. This is one of those episodes that we are really sad to even talk about, but I don't think this will be the last one. And that's the crazy part. We just want you guys to know that, there's help out here. There's suicide hotlines that you can call. Tap into a tribe that can support you when you have those difficult days. Believe it or not, a lot of those people who can support you are not going to be within your family network, because unless they're nurses, they just won't be able to understand. So tap into your community. If you don't have a community, join one that is full of nurses or healthcare professionals who can support you when you're in the journey. But this is not okay. And even if you don't have the ability or the tools to fight for yourself, lean into others who can help you fight that battle, because you don't have to do it alone. Chris, any last words before we go out?
I would just like to encourage nurses also to look into your benefits. If you're needing to talk to a counselor, a lot of times hospitals offer or insurance offers benefits where you can have a few free counseling sessions. So please, if you are feeling down or any kind of way that you feel like you need to talk to somebody, look into that. There's also services like BetterHelp, where you can speak to someone if you're having any issues, and you are fearful for where your mind might be going, because that does, definitely happen. So I encourage everyone to get help and seek help if you feel that you need it.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Chris. All right, you guys. Until next time, thank you guys for listening to the Nurse Boss. The Nurse Boss Shift. I got too many programs. Thank you guys for listening to the Nurse Boss Shift. Again, as always, don't gatekeep. Share it with your other Nurse Boss friends and besties. As you guys know, we're always bringing the up-to-date value and also talking about hot topics like this and seeing how we can be change makers in the fight for the causes that matter the most to us. Until next time, you guys. Bye.